I had some rather, well, for me, I thought it was exciting news. Amazon is putting in a warehouse that is less than 20 minutes drive from here. So I'm thinking same day delivery.
Yeah,
I had some rather, well, for me, I thought it was exciting news. Amazon is putting in a
That's really weird. There's a time war. There's a
that's a
rift.
delay.
So
Wow.
no, that is
Did
that
come
is
from?
half the time when I start a YouTube stream, it starts up muted, and half the time it does not, and I have no rhyme or reason for why that is the case. But it's like, and we will now. I will start up with the speaker on, or I will start with the speaker off, and I don't know why it does that. So usually I have a head earphone in, but the IFB that I have normally it's not working. There's some kind of problem with the cable, so I'm just going with speakers. Yep, exactly. Going free form here. All right. Hey everybody, welcome to Office Hours. If you are watching on YouTube, and you'll see a little link down below, you can click on that, and that link will take you to Zoom, and you can be part of the conversation. If you're a participant and you looking at all these panelists and trying to figure out how you become a panelist, you just got here early. They got here. They have good video, good audio, good opinions. Well, sometimes good opinions, and good internet. And so we open the doors at 6 o'clock. And I can't promise anything between 6 and 6:40. Truly, I mean, today we were talking about food and travel and all kinds of other things like that. But oftentimes there's some good technical discussions as well. It's a lot of fun. So we open up at 6. We start doing our mic checks at 6:40, between 6:40 and 6:43. Now, once we start doing the mic checks, you can't get in. You need to be here before 6:40 to make sure that you can be part of the panel. We would love to have you as part of the panel. So it would be it'd be great to have you join us. If you think that you could add to this conversation, that you know more than we do in some certain subject, that's the whole idea. The power of this is that all of us know something more than the other ones. And so it's the group effort. It's not any one of us that's answering the questions. It's the group effort that really that makes the conversation work. The other thing that makes the conversation work is you asking questions and voting those questions up and down. If you're an attendee and you don't want to be on the panel, do at least ask questions, or at least vote on those questions. And so that drives the entire conversation. This really is a show that is driven by the audience. So anyway, we're depending on you to ask questions. We're depending on you to vote on questions. This week will be a little bit more casual. We'll talk a little bit about what we want to see in the future weeks. I've got some ideas we'll talk a little bit about it right here at the top of the hour for the second hours of where we're going, with those. I had a bit of a production crunch over the last couple of weeks, and so got a little behind on scheduling, but I've got a pretty good idea of what the scheduling look like next week, and then we're really looking at a trajectory into the following weeks after that of what we want to design. So anyway, so that's but usually the second hour is kind of a special vertical, and we'll still kind of keep to that a little bit, but right now this week we're just gonna have 2-hour sessions mostly, so you can just keep on asking questions, and then next week we'll start Monday. I haven't quite figured out yet. On Tuesday we're gonna have an internal discussion about Atmos. We had a big event by Dolby last week, and I think a lot of people are kind of interested in it. So understanding what it takes to produce it, understanding what it is. That Wednesday we're going to do the same thing with vision. And we're not going to bring any special guests in. We're just going to talk amongst ourselves so that we're kind of prepared. My goal is to bring some special guests in the following weeks. So kind of answer our questions and talk to us about how it all works. I think that there'll be more reasons to talk about vision and Atmos in November. So I think we want to keep on getting our head around it. And then Thursday of next week, we're going to talk about, I decided to push it off to next week. We talked about it over the weekend, but we're going to talk about shooting cooking shows. There's a lot of us here that are shooting cooking shows, and I think it's actually a pretty interesting business model right now. So we're going to have a conversation about that. And then Friday we'll talk about production techniques, and Saturday education, of course. And so those are, and this Saturday we still talk about education. So those are the second hours that are coming up. Without any further ado, hand it off to Bill. You got any questions in there?
Yeah, we have a nice little starting group of questions, beginning with John Preto out of Las Vegas and the panel here. And he wants to know, can someone confirm or deny that if I hide self-view in the Zoom interface, the YouTube feed still broadcasts out?
You mean if you hide self-view and you're the broadcaster?
Oh, yeah. Was it last week? I hid self view from the Zoom interface, went to run to the bathroom, and then watch YouTube while I'm in the, and my feed was there still on YouTube.
From the bathroom or from your computer?
No, well, I ran to the bathroom.
Okay.
It
This whole thing
have
has
been-
gone south really
could have
fast.
been disastrous.
All right, go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, self view only hides your view of yourself. It doesn't affect what other people see. It doesn't affect what the stream sees. It's only your view of yourself.
Go ahead, Fenwick.
Yeah, I was going to say kind of the same thing. I know that there's a check. So I set my here. I can show you. I set my screen up where I can see. Oh, I guess I can't show you. I don't know why. Something's broken. Where I see the gallery next to the second display, which is the speaker view. But by checking that off, my picture doesn't come up there. I only see the last person that was speaking. So right now in the speaker view, I see Alex because he asked me to answer the question. But if I tink that box the other way, then I pop up and I get distracted or fascinated by what I see.
Oh. All right, next question.
Eric Hall of Mount Vernon, Washington says, is there a protocol or standard for PTZ, pan, tilt, zoom camera control?
Go ahead, Jason.
The short answer is no. They all tend to pretend to use RS-232, which is a serial port. But I mean, off the top of my head, Visca, Pelco, Canon, Bausch, Samsung,
in general,
Panasonic.
In general, the most common is Visca. So
Right,
Visca is going to
yeah.
be the thing that is generally you'll find in almost every major PTZ camera will be Visca controlled. That protocol is a pretty common control. Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, if I got share screen, I can show you some kind of cool in vMix real quick with the virtual inputs. That might be helpful to. Can you guys see the interface?
We do.
Okay, so here's a bird dog, and here's the PTZ control. So here's some of the standards: Visca, Panasonic. So I'm going to go over to this one that's Sony Visca over IP, and I got the IP address in there. I'm going to connect, and so now I can control that camera. If you guys can see it moving around, and that's a bird dog. And so when I get a position that I like let's say I like that one, I can say create input at this position, and that just created another input. Now I can move somewhere else. So if you're shooting like a concert and you want like the drummer, there's me. There's this infamous stairs that I talk about. So if I want the stairs, there's another shot, create an input at this location. So now if I close out, I've got the camera input and it cruises over there. I got the stairs input. So this could be super helpful for people that are interested in using PTZs to set up these virtual inputs in not just this app, but I believe Mimo Live does it as well. But hopefully that gives Eric a little bit of
That's great.
of additional guidance in picking out one of these things.
Yeah, I'm really interested to see. One of the things I want to look at for the Zap stuff, the Zoom, the new protocol to talk to Zoom, is whether you can do an app that will control the web cameras on the other side. So instead of asking Zoom for control, setting it up so that the camera just happens, the camera, you see the other camera on the other side, you pass Visca or whatever to a far end camera. That would be super useful.
That would be epic.
Yeah. So, I mean, I was even thinking about, can you build a patch for like an ATEM so that the ATEM Mini could see you could have an ATEM Mini on the other side, but you could sync it up so that you could control a camera on the other side through Zoom without any, through the app. I think there's ways that you could build that so that you could control those cameras. Go ahead, Courtney.
Did anyone ever get an answer out of Blackmagic whether the Stream Bridge would allow you to remotely control the Blackmagic cameras?
Not yet.
No.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
I'm getting mine today.
Oh
No.
All right. We will expect a full report tomorrow. No rush. All right. All right. Great. That's great, Jeffrey. So Jeffrey will be doing a presentation tomorrow about the Stream Bridge, and we expect to be complete and in depth and ready for Q&A. No pressure at all. All right. Next question.
Amazon, don't fail me now. It also is from Eric Hall. He's adding on, does anyone have any experience using a Raspberry Pi to connect to Zoom rooms? Note, how about a Pi for graphic overlays?
I think you could probably do basic overlays in a Pi. I think that actually would work just fine. I don't know if you could do key fill, but you could do something that's just over black and build those out. You can definitely do play out from a Pi. I think I talked about this previously, but I know someone, I won't out their company, but I know someone who can just do an Alexa call and have their Pi start playing video and their link start to stream. So it's a pretty cool thing. Jason?
Yeah, the playout from Pi is actually pretty good. The Raspberry Pi 4, I think theoretically, because it does have 2 micro HDMI outs, there's no reason you couldn't output key and fill, but I can't tell you exactly which Pi installation or flavor you would use for that.
Yeah. Next question.
Michael Vospin of Woodstock, Georgia says, Elgato just bought Epocam, an $8 app that allows you to use an iPhone with Zoom. Anybody tried it yet?
A couple people have used it. I mean, Epoch, cross-platform, I believe, and it's definitely one of the camera apps that a lot of people have been using, but I don't have any experience with it. Anybody else? I thought that Beju had used it, but he's not here today, so maybe we'll try to bring that up again, see what he thinks of that. Go ahead, John Preto.
I've used that one, and then the other one that Beju and I have been playing with is Camo, which is superior.
So you think Camo's a better app?
Yes. Yeah.
There you go. And Hosma?
Yeah, I agree. I found Epoch not very reliable, especially wireless. You had to connect it with a cable. It was a little bit more steady, but now and again it would just completely cut off in the middle of your stream. So I wouldn't encourage it.
And hopefully, I mean, part of getting bought by Elgato is that they'll probably tune the code. They have a pretty good back, so they're probably looking at the bones of it, and then how do you clean up all the code to make that work? Next question.
Ed Willick of Valley Cottage, New York says he just got a Brio, and in his limited testing so far with Zoom, he's only seeing 15 frames per second when he checks the statistics. Any idea on why? He's used a 2014 MacBook Pro running Mojave and the latest version of Zoom. Both his ATEM Mini Pro and FaceTime cams successfully send at 30 frames per second.
Jason?
I would almost certainly say that your USB bus is saturated, especially if you're running the ATEM Mini 2.
Although it's interesting that the ATEM Mini, if the ATEM Mini is getting 30, why is I guess if he's doing it at the same time.
Simultaneous, it's going to saturate the bus no matter what.
Definitely. Yeah, you can't do both of those at the same time. Not on a 2014. You need a USB 3 to do that. The 2014 MacBook Pros are only USB 2, I believe. So, yeah. Are they 3? Then I'm wrong. Okay, well, there you go.
If they're 3, they're 3 daisy chained, so you're still going to saturate it.
Yeah, it's I do think in 2014 you'd also have some CPU issues if you plug both of those in at the same time. I'm surprised that you're getting clean 30 frames a second out of the ATEM Mini on a 2014 MacBook Pro.
The way that you would do it would be through Thunderbolt, right? You just get a Thunderbolt dock, and that would give you enough speed.
But I'm just saying the CPU just to manage it the 2014 is pretty long ago. It'd be interesting. Go ahead, Nikki.
I'm wondering, I think this question was brought up a couple of days ago, and I'm not sure if Ed has clarified this. Like, I'm wondering if he's looking at the statistics while everyone else could be in gallery view, because gallery view will only send the resolution and a much, much lower frame rate.
Right.
If no one's asking for your full resolution, full frame rate video.
He seems to be noticing that it works well with other devices. So it seems like he must be in full screen. But yeah, if in gallery mode, you definitely won't get that. You'll have to be in the full screen mode or someone else has to be on the other side watching you at full screen to make sure that you test it correctly. Next question.
Rick Combs of Columbia, Tennessee says, I know that YouTube and Facebook have closed captions on playback. Does YouTube and Facebook have closed captions on live view? I see the settings, but haven't had any luck getting it to work.
It's not automatic. So one of the things you need to do with captions for YouTube or Facebook or many other platforms is you have to actually, if you're doing it live, you have to have something insert that audio live. So there's a couple different ways to do that. Generally, it's a person, but it can be a service. And there are AI services that do it. There's actually a company called AI out of Australia that will let you stream to them, and then they pass it back to Facebook with captions. The caption formatting coming through their system is not great. the typical way to get captions into both Facebook and YouTube, the most traditional way, is using a embedded 608, 708, feed. So basically, you have a caption service or a caption hardware that's going to insert 608, 708 into the SDI feed that you're using for your show. When that goes into your encoder, and a lot of encoders can see it, it will take that embedded SDI signal and embed it into the RTMP that's being streamed to Facebook and YouTube. They know what to do with that, so they'll be able to take that captioning and insert it into the stream and put it out. Now, typically, the way you do that is you have some kind of captioning hardware that is going to insert that. We use what's called an EEG 492 is what we're using for most of our work. The way we do it, and again, this is kind of a heavy-handed process, but the way we do it is we have an EEG 492 that gets the audio. It strips the audio out of SDI and feeds just the audio back to a captioner anywhere in the world. That captioner we're using a service called iCap, and that iCap, the captioner sits there and types away. They hear the audio through iCap most of the time. Oftentimes we have a backup just in case. When they type it in, they're through a stenographer. It's a stenographer input. It comes back over iCap back into our EEG, which then inserts the captioning into the 608, 708, into the line 21 of the SDI signal. Then that goes back into our encoder. Our encoder then passes it forward. So that is the broadcast approach to most of these things. The other way to get it into YouTube is to use an HTTP input. You still need a captioner or a caption service that can use that. So what they then do is the captioner can in YouTube, you'll see down below, you'll see 608 or you'll see HTTP input. If you set it to HTTP input, it'll give you a key. You give the captioner that key and they put it into their system and they can stream it to an HTTP input that will then have the captioning show up on YouTube, accurately. The cool thing about the HTTP input is that if you add delay to your live stream, so if you take your encoder and add buffer to it, our encoders will let us just add buffer to the stream. We can actually time because it's not embedded into the SDI signal. We can sync up basically we're slowing down our stream by 4 seconds. And then the captions come out right as the person's talking, which is kind of a fun little thing to do as far as resyncing the captions, which is not something you see in live very often. Typically, your live captions are coming in 2 to 6 seconds behind, depending on the frequency of the captioner. We find that most captioners that do it at 2-second delay are not very accurate. The ones at 6 seconds is a little long, so we're looking for usually captioners that are running at 3 to 4 seconds of delay. That's the human delay of what they're doing, and that seems to be a good mix of speed versus accuracy. So that's that's a very long-winded solution. Obviously, I deal with captions a lot. The other thing is that remember that the hyperdeck will actually save an MMC file or an MCC file as it gets captions. And so you can actually, if you're doing tests or you're working on stuff, if you get any captioning, that there's a file. If you get a video with captions going into a hyperdeck, it will save a little text file that is the captions. And that can and if you play that file back from the hyperdeck, it'll play it out with the captions embedded into the bank data, so that it can be picked up. You can also use that as the basis to convert to SRT or other things like that. Now, if you leave the captions up, usually they won't be perfectly accurate, but if you don't do any captions, YouTube will eventually come back and do it. And there are some YouTube accounts that get live captioning automatically. It's something I think that is slowly working its way out. And same thing with Facebook. They're slowly rolling out the ability to use AI. Although we find that AI is typically, unless you have a really good microphone, AI is typically between 65 and 80% accurate, where a human is typically 90 to 95% accurate. So it's of course they'll say 98%, but it's not. It's 99, especially in technical terms, which we deal with a lot of technical streams. So captioning is it's growth industry. A lot of people. It really blew up when Facebook started using it, because it ceased to be just accessibility and became marketing, because people make a decision about whether they're going to start watching your show based on what they read on the caption. So you do a live stream in the stream, they look at it, they don't turn audio on, they read the captions. And so that behavior created a huge, increase in demand for captioners, to the point where now it's difficult. We have to book captioners almost every day. And it's a bear to get good captioners, because it's just, they're under such demand at the moment. It's easy to find, but final notes about that is it's easy to find captions in English and Spanish. It's easiest to find English because it's a law. All broadcasters must carry captions. So there's a lot of English captioners. There's less Spanish captioners, but a lot of them. Once you get out of that, you're in for, the one thing we can't find, anytime someone says, well, we want Hindi or Chinese, Mandarin, you can't do that. And it has to do with the fact that you just can't type. There's no way to type it in real time. So that doesn't happen there. But the other thing, the last note I'll do before I hand it off to Jason, is that we recommend, when you're doing multi-language, if you're using captioning as accessibility or marketing, English is great. We recommend, if you're doing multi-language, that you use audio. So if you're going to do 6 languages, it's much better to have translators or interpreters listening to it, getting the audio back, and then inserting that in streaming out separate audio tracks. And the reason for that is that when you do captions or subtitles to languages, it means that everyone watching is now looking at the bottom of the screen. They're not looking at anything. They might as well just do a radio show at that point, because they're not, especially if you're talking fast, they're not watching anything, because they need to watch the bottom. So if you add audio instead of captions, you end up with a more pleasing experience for the viewer. Go ahead, Jason.
I have a really simple question, which is, having never watched a captioner, do they use the same kinds of keyboards as stenographers?
It is.
If so, have you ever thought of hiring stenographers in a pinch?
They're all stenographers. That's what they are. The captioners are stenographers. That's what they do. They are stenographers that happen to know how to use caption systems. So I don't think there's any I don't know, but I don't think there's almost any stenographers, unless they have a full-time job at in a court environment. I don't think any of them don't know how to use captions, because it's a bigger business than court cases. But all of them are that way, and all of them, many of them started in court proceedings and so on and so forth. But then it's funny, so there's one show that we do every year, or we used to do every year, where we would bring the captioners in, because it was, high security. We'd have 5 captioners, 4 plus a spare, captioner, and they'd all be local. So we would build local captioning stations for them, and we got to talk to the actual captioners, and because then at that point we're using RS-232 or maybe 422. Anyway, so it's really funny that we're still using these little analog connections to EEG, but so we got to talk to them a lot. And I told them, I just imagine you guys like in your like in your pajamas in the living room, just typing away all day. And they're like, yeah, that's pretty much it. They were like, it was like, just like, it's a pretty casual setup for them. They just hook into the internet. As long as they've got a good internet connection, they just hook in, they hear the audio, they type it away. And most of them are pretty busy. Yeah. Like they stay about as busy as they want. It's a good business, but it takes years to get, trained. That's the big thing. What's faster is what they call re-speaking, which we talked about a little bit over the weekend, I think. So re-speaking is a skill where you listen and you talk, you say the words at roughly the same time. So you're literally re-speaking the audio that you're hearing. And the reason that works is because the person talking has accents, and they have room noise, and they have all these music and everything else that confuses the AI. So the re-speaker speaks into, I believe, a form of Dragon software that has been trained to their voice. They've been trained to speak it. And so they speak it very clearly, and it's very accurate, but it also takes a lot less time to learn how to do re-speaking. So it's a faster solution to get that. Anyway, it's something I think about a lot. So it's a good question. Anyway, next question.
Next question I started out thinking was a video question, but it may not be. Charles Klein of New York City says, hi, everybody. This morning, a buddy asked me, what's the safest free application to convert MOV to MXF OP-Atom? Catalina has caused havoc with his Avid, but then he said best to ask the audio pros. So he may be looking for using his tools for an audio
Resolve.
transfer.
Resolve is the best free one. Oh, maybe Mickey may have a better one.
Yeah. Avid recommends a free app called Shutter Encoder. The interface is kind of clunky, but it gets the job done. Yeah, Catalina, horrible for codecs in general because of the forced 64-bit requirement for all the codecs, all the apps. So Avid generally, yeah, like as of now, still says stay on Mojave, don't go to Catalina or newer. Um, uh, Me personally, I use what do you call this? Adobe's media encoder, just because it allows you to build a queue and it has a lot more control than the free app like Shutter Encoder. So I personally use what do you call this? I personally use what do you call this, media encoder for that.
And then also know that the free version of Resolve will do it. So you can bring something into Resolve and export it out, and then the free version will execute that for you if you need it. I don't know if it batches. I think you can, but I've never tried to do that. I don't know if it batches, but you can definitely, if you need to convert a file, it'll convert from one to the other. Next question.
James Babbitt in San Diego says, "Hi, Alex. What device would you use to decode the Atmos information for the overhead speakers in a home theater?"
We're using. Sorry, say it again.
An AV receiver, yeah.
Yeah, AVR. Yeah. So we're using a Denon AVR. I don't remember the model number, but it was about $1,000. So I'll find it, but it's a but we have a 514 setup in the office. So you need an AVR typically, or you can get, again, if you have all the other stuff, you would use an AVR. If you don't, a lot of people are. I mean, the effect of the speaker, the sound bars, is actually pretty good, and you can get a variety of wireless solutions that allow you to have a couple overhead speakers. You have the AirPods. So you can get sound bars that will come if you're going to get a 5.1 or 7.1, or 7.2 or whatever. But you have, for the 5.1, that's 5 speakers in a subwoofer, and so a lot of times you get a sound bar with that woofer, and that's your basic setup. But if you start getting into overheads, oftentimes they have up pointing speakers that will bounce it off of your ceiling, depending on, that can be fairly effective in a relatively standard geometry of a room. So you don't have to go out and you can now get something that is like the AVR system setup that we have here is probably, I don't know, $6,000 or $7,000 for the speakers and the AVR and all the little bits and pieces in between. But for anywhere from $500 to $1,500, you can get a good sound bar with a subwoofer and a couple overhead speakers or a couple back speakers, and it works pretty well. And it's pretty easy the wireless stuff makes it really easy to tie it in. So it's a pretty once you get used to it, it's hard to give up. And then Chris Fenwick pointed out in his that the AirPod Pros will also, if you're watching on your iOS or Mac devices, now have a lot of tools that help you feel like you're really a dimensionality to the audio. And it's one of the reasons that I want to spend more time talking about Atmos and Vision, is because Apple is pushing down on it, and if Apple pushes down on it, everyone else will. And so it's going to be, thinking about audio as multi-channel, not just stereo, and thinking about video as in the terms of high dynamic range is going to be very, very important for media professionals. And it's not that your business will just go away, but there's a whole new land with AR, HDR, surround sound, educational infrastructure. These in my opinion are some of the really low hanging juicy fruit for media developers right now, where there's very little competition. And if we get out ahead of it, you can take a lot of ground very quickly. Hosmuk and then Chris.
I believe with the 4K Apple TV, you can view Atmos supported, stream Atmos supported movies. My question was that to appreciate Atmos sound, do you have to change your AV receiver in your current home cinema setup?
Yeah, it has to be able to see it. I mean, the Apple TV can pass that data through the HDMI 2.0 to the AVR or the AV receiver, but the AV receiver has to understand what it's looking at, and the Apple TV looks at the receiver and decides whether it can handle Atmos or not, and then sends it Atmos or it doesn't. And if it doesn't send it, you just don't get that. But that is but you definitely have to have a receiver that can understand what it's getting. Go ahead, Hosma, and then Chris.
Some sales guys hounding me today to sell me a Accurus that he had updated to the latest for supporting Atmos. And in Rand terms, he wants 250,000 Rand. So I thought, okay, I need to find out a little bit more on how I can set this up.
The 250,000, how much is 250,000 Rand?
It's about $15,000 or a little bit more. Yeah.
That's a lot of money. I don't think you need that.
Yeah, about $20,000 to $30,000, and I thought was no.
No, I wouldn't do that. I think I wouldn't. I'd be hard pressed.
I can't do it.
You can't do it, right? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, Chris.
So I have a couple questions. One, the way that Apple has had Atmos and stuff in some of their products, it's somewhat analogous to Sony in the mid and late 80s. They started putting a little port on their cameras called a Control L port. And for the first 2 years, I think there was no indication as to what it was. And what it later became was they called it LANC, LANC, so that you could like set up little tape to tape editors. And it was brilliant that they just put that port out there, and there was no documentation about it. It was just a hole on the side of the cameras and stuff. So Apple's kind of doing that with all of the support that they're doing. Like I didn't know my phone could do what it did when I bought it 2 years ago. Right. Then the next question, the real question, actually, that was me just trying to prove I know something.
Well, here's what's interesting is that what it does mean is that for everyone getting the new iPhone 12 that can shoot vision, you're not just sharing with other people who buy an iPhone 12. You're sharing the last two generations of
mine
iPhones.
Is a 10X Max, yeah.
Yeah. So the thing is that there's already hundreds of millions of people that can use your,
and that's
your
the
content.
brilliance. It's like the Control L port in the 80s on Sony gear. So then the question is, when I'm shooting stuff with standard cameras, is there any, and I say that because I don't know anything about cameras, like a Sony FX7. I know we use those. We have an XS9. I think we have, I don't even know all that stuff. Is there any benefit of me importing that footage into an HDR or a Rec 2020
Absolutely.
wide gamut in Final Cut?
Yeah, but you have to start in log. So if you're shooting log, so those cameras will all shoot log.
Okay.
And so that's going to increase your range that you have.
Okay.
The log has more data in it than you'll use in HDR, right? So in all these HDR formats are going to be actually less than that, right? So that log data, when we shot all these interviews that went out last week, those were all shot just in Blackmagic RAW, right? And so that's all in a log. But the log is what's important there. And
you're talking about the interviews that you shot of like the execs,
mm-hmm.
And you shot that on your 6K on a 6K.
Yep. And so the $2,000 camera. So anyway, so the log is going to hold all the data. There's two things that are important. One is that it's in log in log, and so that you have a lot more range. Number two, though, is that you have to make sure that you're capturing it in 10-bit or 12-bit, because the bits, we'll talk about this next week a little bit, but the bits are the number of gray values in each channel that can represent gradients and soft changes. And so what's going to happen when you go into HDR, you're going to stretch all of that out. And if there's not enough bits in between, you get stair stepping, and that looks like, it looks like posterization, right? So that's the posterization is that when you see posterization, it's because across this distance, I'm trying to cover a very small change, and I don't have enough bits to create even steps, right? So you need it to be 10-bit or 12-bit capture, and most of those cameras can do that. And so, and then once you go in there, absolutely, then you're going to convert that. That's when you're going to do a LUT, a lookup table, from your log input into your whether it's PQ or Vision or HLG. You'll make that stretch, and then you'll do the color correction. You'll absolutely get more data out of it. And so,
And is there any benefit if you're even putting stuff like, say, from a Brio web record?
you can stretch. You only have 8 bits, so you can only take it so far at that point. Especially over Zoom. But we've done it, so you can definitely make it look prettier by stretching that back out again. You will see posterization, you will see macro blocking, you'll see things because remember, most of these are perceptual, so they're throwing away data that they don't think you're going to see. When you change the contrast and exposure, you bring those things out because the algorithm was like, I didn't think you were going to look there. It's like doing color correction to a JPEG. It's like all this stuff starts coming out because it's like, hey man, you weren't supposed to look under the table. And so that's the real issue with doing that on a compressed format.
And then one last question, and if you don't want to talk about this, you can.
I don't want to talk about anything related to last week.
Okay.
Courtney.
Getting back to the original question and Hasmuk's problem, I've used Yamaha receivers in their latest ones. They've got a whole line of AVRs that support Dolby Atmos, and here's one for around $600, but you can get them cheaply. Also, Denon and almost all the AVRs now support.
You could always get an AVR around that price bracket. All of the brands do them.
Right.
Yep. Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, in terms of AVRs, like it scales up in terms of price the more channels you want. On the lower end, you're thinking about maybe 500, 600 US for like a 514 or 712 AVR. And of course, it scales up. Like if you want to go crazy and go 11.2.8, it scales up from there. So, think of how many speakers you want and build your AVR from that. And of course, think of future proofing a little bit.
Good. Alex?
As regards Dolby Vision, in the case of the iPhone workflow, I asked during the Dolby Summit what their take is on how the iPhone 12 to Mac workflow was. And they said, for now, what happens is that the footage that's shot inside the iPhone 12, they will actually generate the Dolby Vision metadata for each shot. So the idea is that their software will analyze each shot and find the right kind of the range of brightnesses and also the color balance in it, you could call it, and then create a series of numbers, and that's metadata per shot. But at the moment, that information is not readable by any app that runs on the Mac or PC. So that the metadata isn't actually being read yet. So what they advise the workflow is to treat it like a log camera. And you actually introduce this footage from your iPhone 12 series into your Final Cut Pro or any other app that can deal with log footage. And
treat it like
that.
The iPhone 12 can shoot log?
Well, the instruction, the person from Dolby said you import it as HLG. The media from the iPhone 12 as HLG, so hybrid log gamma footage into Final Cut or whatever, and then you do your editing away, and then you import that into Resolve, and then you change your project to a PQ project, and then you run the Dolby analysis software, the Dolby Vision analysis software, and then it creates all the probably very similar metadata that the iPhone did, and then you do your grade. So that's what they said in the answer they gave me during the Dolby Summit. For now, and ideally, Apple did say when the iPhone 12 came out that Final Cut by the end of the year is going to have features to add Dolby Vision to it. So that either will mean that it'll be able to read the metadata for the iPhone, or even more, they might be able to, the Final Cut will be able to modify each of the shots and change that metadata, or maybe with sidecars or whatever, and then pass it on to things like Resolve.
There's a Final Cut Summit coming up, isn't there?
Yes.
When is that?
In a couple of weeks.
Yeah, a couple of weeks.
So Thursday of the 2 weeks and 3 days from now. Yes. So there's going to be
it'd be a really convenient time to talk about that, wouldn't it?
Apple is formally presenting there. We've heard that.
Hey, when is Apple presenting? Do we know what
on the
time?
Thursday? So it's on the
Thursday.
Thursday of the week after next. Is that the 18th or the? It's 2 days after people think the Apple Silicon Macs are coming out, but maybe the Apple Silicon Macs will come out on that Thursday, because Apple have already announced that they're going to be doing their Apple Day at the Final Cut Pro.
No, I think that would be
FCBX Creative Summit.
A really handy time to update, the whole platform.
Is the summit? Does the summit cost money?
It does, but here's
it's a couple $100 though. It's not like it used to be where you have to fly there.
Mm-hmm.
But the twist is, of course, is that Apple do like their secrecy, and I don't think they're going to trust any stream coming from the FCBX Creative Summit to only go to people who pay. So I think there's a relatively good chance that maybe that day will be public, because why not? Given the fact that they can't keep it secret, and they're going to have to be quite careful about what they say on it. So who knows if those presentations will actually be private or not, and you'll have to pay to go to it.
Well, if they're not private, if they are public, I think that'd be a fun for us to do the second year experience.
I think while they have people's attention with the new Apple Silicon and new version of Final Cut that runs on Apple Silicon, and everyone's asking questions about Dolby Vision, because that'll be one of the new features in the new version of Final Cut, which they've already announced. Why not actually make the opportunity for people who don't even know or care about Final Cut to actually learn about it and the Dolby Vision workflow for the iPhone, and use it as PR for Dolby Vision?
Well, as we find out more, we'll probably do something here. So if there are things that are publicly available, you can count on us doing a second year experience, where we all discuss it like we did with the Apple thing. Any Apple event, and if there's other events that we're missing, I have to admit, I tend to be in a hole of working and so on and so forth. But if you guys see other tech events that we should do, kind of that second year experience, depending on what time and everything else, I'd be open to it. I think that was a really successful thing that I'd like to refine. Go ahead, Fenwick, and then George.
I was going to say that at the past summits, they have been, it's a very interesting, crossbreed of Apple privacy and secrecy, because they bring, for the last few years, they bring us into a theater, one of the theaters, not the Steve Jobs theater, but the one over at Infinite Loop. And they would say very adamantly, no cameras, nothing. And then they'd give a presentation. And then they'd walk us across the hall for a hands-on thing. And they were very openly saying, yes, please tweet this, please share this. And it was the same information they gave across the hall. And usually it has to do with the fact that there's something copywritten in the presentation, they can't share it. But there was a moment of absolute secrecy. And then the next moment they're like, yes, please use your cameras.
It probably is. If they were showing any kind of example files,
yeah.
I think that would be the thing that would.
That's what it was. But then the other thing that they've done at the Creative Summit for the last 2 years, Bill, I believe it was, is they have the panel discussion with the developers, and it's really candid, and Apple's never done that in the past. They
have an on-off conversation about privacy, I think, inside the teams, and then how they interface with the public. I had an experience some years ago where somebody I know at Apple kind of said, and I kind of just said, I know you can't talk about a lot of this, but why do you do what you're doing, which is you're kind of letting us behind the curtain, but you're not really letting us, and you're putting us under NDA so we can't talk about things.
We're behind the curtain, but the lights are off.
Yeah, and he said, basically, here's the deal. We know that there's going to be chatter everywhere. A lot of it we can't control, but some people are going to say things that are just flat out 180 degree totally wrong. And it's not a bad idea to have a few people out there who can push back and say, no, that is stupid. They're not discontinuing Final Cut 10. And I can tell you that for absolutely sure. I can't tell you how I know, but I can know that. So it's that level of confusion is part of why they pull up a corner maybe of the NDA stuff and just say, you guys probably aren't going to spread the big stories, but there's a need for reality out there, because in the Apple ecosystem of chatter, a lot of it is just speculation and wild craziness, and that can damage the product.
All right.
They also know that it's one last thing. They also know that it's an entire event filled with fans.
Press.
No, not press. fans, like hardcore
Right.
family members.
They
I
paid to be
call
here.
them. Yeah, and so it's friendly words that they get. Okay,
George.
I don't know if it was mentioned yet, but the Unreal Summit is coming up on November 10th. I'm going to put a link in the chat. That looks like it has a pretty good lineup, and maybe
Let's
something
see.
we should
I don't
look
think I would do the whole day or anything, but if there's a keynote, you know, or there's a main thing that we want to look at, you know, grabbing an hour of something would be fun. Yep. So let's find the schedule and figure out when we can jump on that. Next question.
Next question comes from Paul Prusakowski in Gainesville. If there are any vMix users here today, did Zoom change recently so that the local desktop captures work differently? I was previously able to select one of multiple Zoom desktops easily with either the gallery or pinned one or two. This weekend, the desktop captures showed differently.
Guy and then Stuart.
Yeah, if you want to check it out, I'll go ahead and pull it up real quick. Here, share. So this is what I'm getting. It says Zoom meetings 1, 2, and 3, and I went ahead and added 1. Ooh, no, cancel that. I went ahead and, oh, is it still going?
No, it dropped out.
No, I'm pushing I'm pushing this computer to its knees right now. So Paul, to answer your question, basically I tried it for you, and my CPU went to 99%. So I added 1, 2, and 3, and they're not getting video through the 1, 2, and 3. But if I do a desktop capture of my second monitor, then the gallery view comes through, the pinned video comes through. But what I was trying to show you is that if I choose just the isolated Zoom app, no video passes through. So that's what I'm seeing on the current version.
Good, Stuart.
I wasn't seeing any changes, but I was just wondering, is Paul asking whether the signal is going into vMix or into Zoom, because they're different pathways? It's not really clear with the question which way he's going.
Right.
It seems like he's trying to capture, because he's saying pin, so he's trying to capture, you know, trying to scrape those to feed them into vMix. So popular thing to do is to pin, you know, speakers on 1, 2, and 3, and then suck them in and cut as necessary.
And that's very CPU intensive, is what you're saying.
Yeah, it's saturating my poor little Razer laptop. But this is what I'm seeing right now on my second display, if you guys can see that. And that's coming through okay.
Got it. Very good. Next question.
Next question comes from Dan Huber in Erie, Pennsylvania. And Dan asks, has anyone seen or played with that Zoom appliance from DTEN called the ME? Note, I was thinking of a solution in our library study rooms for students to attend classes.
I haven't used it yet. So I don't, I may start reaching out to some folks about, you know, getting us some test units to play with to see how it works. But yeah, I haven't played with this one yet. Go ahead, Guy.
I haven't played with that one in particular, but the Facebook portal for $299 is very similar. And it's basically a Zoom room. They call it a collaboration device in the back end, and it does a lot of the stuff that Zoom rooms do. I went on the show yesterday, and it's kind of nice to just have a device that's solely for it, and then having the touch screen. And the brilliant thing about the D10ME is that it's a 27-inch touchscreen where you can do whiteboard. And so I think that for a family room, it's going to be a cool device. I mean, it's kind of a peering into the future because you can call people with it. It's just like the modern, well, not modern day, it's the futuristic, you know, George Jetson telephone, because that's basically where Zoom's going, is that these devices are going to be your phone. So like right now, I can just see all my contacts and I could just hit that person. It rings them on their phone or on their desktop and they answer, and I'm in a telepresence or teleconference with them. So really cool devices. That Zoom one, the D10ME is also a second monitor. So for teachers, it's kind of cool that it's not just a Zoom device. You can use it functionally as a second HDMI monitor. So $599, they're backordered like crazy because a lot of teachers are.
A lot of people need them. Yeah. The also as a quick note for our viewers, the you wonder why we're waxing away at a lot of these questions, is because there's not that many questions. And so we've got time. We've got time here. So if you have questions that you've been wondering about or thinking about putting in, this is the time to do it. Usually we have a couple more questions here. We're just going to another hour of the same thing. So so if you've got questions specifically, go ahead and put those into the question system, and then Bill will give us the next one.
Moving on to Hasmukh from here in the panel, and Hasmukh asks, look into the camera. What setup would you suggest to view a virtual meeting window and at the same time look into the camera, or cameras, I guess? In the Dolby event, I think mention was made that a teleprompter and camera was set up for the talent.
Well, in general, if I'm able to, I will always have people have teleprompters. I'm a more general answer than specifically for last week. I prefer, I don't have one on right now, so I'm looking just a little bit under my camera. But I find that in general, the direct eye contact, so I'm looking straight at you, that's the way I want to look at you when I'm doing that. I want to have that connection with you. And I think that it's much more personal. I think that if you look at like what Google did a couple of weeks ago, where everyone was looking off camera, I was like, why would you do that? If you look at all of the top TikTokers, the 20 million and above followers, almost all of them are really good at eye contact. They're able to create a sense of connection through that eye contact with the phone. And so you want to reproduce that as much as you can. There is no reason to look away. The reason we look away is because we couldn't do it any other way before that. And so, and then Errol Morris started putting, people before him, but he's the one that made it popular, the Interatron process of looking straight into the camera. But otherwise, I've always felt like looking off camera is like just an old, it's an old way of doing things. Like you always want to look into the camera if you can. And so, anyway, so I don't ever believe in, like, if we have the advantage that we're sitting right in front of a camera as a single head, there's I would never look off camera. I would never set that up unless you do it because you're doing interviews and you have to do it that way, right? You have two people talking to each other, like at 60 Minutes or something. There's no other way to do it then. But if I'm doing interviews, I would always, and I'm doing Zoom and presentations, the modern way to do that. And if you look at why that's important, is look at all the YouTubers. They're all looking straight into the camera. Like they're not, that's the future. There's not going to be any, like, the whole looking off camera is just a weird artifice that we've used since, because we didn't have any better technology. Go ahead, Hasmukh, and then Jason, then Jeffrey, and then Bill.
Yeah, for the cooking class on Saturday, I had the main camera facing the talent was an iPhone, so it was a little higher up. Then I put a monitor in front of the talent so that she could make connection with the attendees. So she kept on looking at the attendees, and my daughter is jumping up and down behind the main camera saying, look into the camera, look into the camera. So it's kind of hard for the talent to keep up with that, the two things to keep an eye on.
Yeah, so the main thing is that the other thing to think about when you're doing that, if you don't have a teleprompter, is to take the camera and just put it in front of the monitor. She doesn't need, you're not shooting it, doesn't matter what it looks like. So just mount the camera. We do this all the time. We put a little web camera with a really thin mount, and you have like an 80-inch screen, and there's a little webcam right in the center, just pointed at them, and then they just look at the screen. So that the cheap way to do this eye contact thing is just to put a web. They don't care whether it's blocking part of one square or another, but we would have like a big screen. I'll see if I can find a picture of that. I have a picture of that doing it that we've used in the past, but that is that's a cheap way to do it, is just to put a camera and just drop a camera in the center of the screen. But then again, you can do teleprompters as well, and that works fine too. Go ahead, Jason, and then Jeffrey.
Yeah, +1 on the teleprompter. Guy really helped me out. I was an expert witness 2 weeks ago in state second judicial district court, but it was over Zoom, which was incredibly weird, and it made all the difference to just be able to look them directly in the eye. Just compared to the other expert witnesses, there's nothing quite like it. It is absolutely worth its weight in gold.
And again, the thing to remember is that we always want to keep thinking about not what people notice, but what they feel. And so when you look better, when you sound better, when you have eye contact, they feel differently about you than what they did before. And so people think it doesn't matter because, oh, no one's going to notice. It's not. What you want to get into is their subconscious, not into their conscious. You want them to feel like you're in more control, feel like you have a better setup or whatever, but they will have a different impression of you if you pay attention to all these little details as you go through. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
I've been playing with an idea here that well, it helps me with not only doing this, but also creating different camera angles. And it was based on that whole idea with Mevo where you only put on a certain part of the screen. And I'm still trying to figure out if this works or not. Let me just show you really quick how this works. So my camera right now is a tight shot into me, but ultimately this is the shot that the camera is doing. And of course the software is now bringing it back into me so you can see me like this. This is, whoops, that's not the right one. This is what I see when I'm looking at you. So as you can see, the secondary video is very tightly close to your camera, to my camera, excuse me, right behind you. And the theory that I have is I can actually look up a little bit, not looking at the lens, and it still looks like that it's coming through because of the fact it's got a wide amount of view from the camera. I'm just tightening it in using software, and I don't know. Do you see that? Because right now I'm not looking at the lens. I'm looking at the monitor. Does it look like?
Definitely. What I do is I use a lot of times as best I can. I stack the windows of people talking, that if I'm talking to them, I stack them right under where the camera is on my grid. So that's one of the ways I use the ability to reorder my grid. If someone's talking, I just move their square right under the camera, and then that's going to move my eyes, to them and get as close. Like I'm looking at you and it's not quite on because my camera is pretty high up at the moment. But yeah, the more you can get the person you're talking to be as close to that camera as possible, the better. Bill?
But with that theory, do you see me looking at you? Because like I said, I'm not looking at the lens right now. I'm looking at probably
it looks like you're looking at your audience.
Yeah, it looks like it.
Okay.
It's not perfect, but it's very close.
No, it's close.
It still looks just under, but it's very close. Go ahead, Bill.
So there's a little bit of theory on that then. Cool.
Yeah, well, getting your eye line. It's just trying to get your eye line to match up as best you can. Go ahead, Bill, and then Stuart.
Yeah, for me, the weirdest part of this whole thing is that as you do more, because this is the era of one person being able to do the camera, and we're trying to run a computer, and we're trying to look up things, I have so many screens now around me that if I'm looking at the panel to handle questions on a day that Alex isn't here, I'm also trying to do the feed that's coming back off of YouTube over here. As you know, I'm handling questions today, so I've got another screen over here. And just conditioning myself to continually look at the audience is a thing that I've had to do for myself, because if not, I'm just in my regular computing mode where there may be somebody behind me and I'm talking to them, but I'm paying no attention to them. I'm just doing what I have to do and describing it. So it's just, I think, something you have to rehearse. You have to remember that the people are out there.
Especially if you're working with somebody else and you're setting them up, they're not going to rehearse.
Yeah.
So what you're looking at is when you're working with talent, you want to get a teleprompter or you want to drop a webcam in front of it. It works much better. Go ahead, Stuart. I can't hear you, Stuart.
There we go. The bargain basement version of getting the right eye line. There's my camera. Right there in the middle, which if we just go down to... There we go. So generally I'm looking at this screen, which would normally be whoever's speaking, and I speak to them. It's right in the middle. It's the bargain basement way of doing it if you can't afford or can't get hold of a teleprompter at the moment, and it does allow you to do cookie vision as well.
The most important.
So their face is actually split apart in the middle of the lens, half and half.
Yeah.
Weird.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm Australian. What do you expect?
Go ahead, Courtney, and then Alex.
Yeah, we've done a lot of research on eyeline, running a teleprompting company, because you get a lot of people that, of course, have to insist on it at looking into the lens, and there are situations where we can't use a beam splitter on the camera for
Right.
steady cams or handheld cameras, things like that. So we use a 4-inch to a 6-inch display for the text if it's working with a teleprompter, and put it right above the lens or right below the lens.
Right.
And it really depends on the distance of the talent to the lens as to whether you buy the eyeline or not. And once you get further away than about 4 feet, you cannot tell the difference between, a 6-inch display just directly above the lens versus a beam splitter with a look right into the lens, because you can't really tell the attitude of the pupils and the eyes at that distance, even if they're on a close-up. It's just the distance between the camera and the talent that determines the salability of that in the lens look.
And this is a relative. To Courtney's point, the smaller one, is a smaller monitor helps a lot. This is an example of. Let's see if I can get it. Click on it here. So here's an FX. What was this? FX 200 or SF 200 or anyway, long time ago. This was our webcam in 2012. But you can see a small monitor right below it, which we thought looked better here, so that you have them looking straight at it. So this is, but a smaller monitor. It was a temptation to have a large monitor, and that does not help, because it just means that they moves their eye line much further apart, from that. I think I might have some other, let's see here, of the webcam example that I was talking about earlier. You can see this is just flat out like webcam, but the monitor is right behind that webcam. We didn't even put it up against the monitor. And what's interesting is they just kind of focus past it, as they work on it. So it is something to kind of consider, is a small monitor near the lens, or something right in front of the TV, oftentimes will work pretty well. Go ahead, Alex, and then Chris. And we'll move on.
So I'm using my 15-inch MacBook Pro, and I don't have a separate camera. I'm now looking at Alex's eyes if the window is full size. So all I'm doing now is I'm going to drag the bottom of the window, of the zoom window. So now I'm looking right at Alex's eyes, and all I've done is just made the window really short at the top of the screen. And now my eye line is almost good enough, I say. And then now I send to the window, and now I'm kind of...
And we tell people that. We tell people just to pull that window as high on your screen as possible. We tell our remotes all the time, just get that screen as close to that top area as possible, and to the level that they do that. But I'm going to be going into an R&D process of building new teleprompters that are going, that are specifically built for this, because it's just, we need a next generation of this stuff. So we're gonna.
It's a pity you can't have like a periscope that I can stick on on my screen.
They used to do that.
Moves down.
Someone made a periscope.
Yeah,
someone made a periscope that just did that, but it was a little funky. Go ahead, Chris.
As an editor, I almost never get to be on the set, but I was cutting a piece for it was a promo piece for Shane Hurlbut years ago, and he put 2 cameras right next to each other, like literally the tripod legs were overlapping each other, and one was the tight shot, and then one was like a below the waist shot, and then they had a third camera kind of off the side arty look, and he spoke to the close-up camera, and I was really amazed that in the wide shot I couldn't really tell he wasn't looking right at me, and it really speaks a lot to the whole focal length, kind of what Jeffrey was saying about being zoomed in, biting in on the close-up of the sensor. It's really interesting.
To get for that, the thing I'm excited about is that I'm hoping to test soon is 8K and 12K cameras to do punch-ins, where I just for that type of solution, is just to.
I don't like punch-ins.
What?
As an editor, I don't like punch-ins, because I can see that like this thing next to my head, it should change a little bit.
Well, but it wouldn't if you were zooming in. Zooming wouldn't change.
Yeah, but nobody zooms in one frame.
I know, but that's amazing. It's magic. I don't mean as much as punch-ins, but what I'm playing with is the idea of shooting things that are wide. Not so much punch-ins but shooting things wide, and so that I can design around it. So it's that I can come to that shot, back to that shot, and it can be a wide shot or a close-up shot. The hard part is getting people to do the performance over and over and over again in wide, and then close-up is challenging.
having the
do it
energy
well.
be the same.
Anyway, we're going to go to the next question. We've talked that one out.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay, James Babbitt of San Diego. Hi, Alex. Your background was showing gray blocks yesterday, and now it looks smooth. Did you change your settings?
I changed my location. So I am now at my office instead of my house. So my office just has a wall that's painted gray, and I'm using the studio BMD studio camera. I was short up until this weekend. I was short a web presenter, so now I'm going to go back and get that set up. So I'll be back to a better camera at home soon. But yeah, it's a better camera, and otherwise I don't know why it's actually a little dark, but yeah. Anyway, it's just a different location, different camera. Next question.
Stuart Fairweather from the panel in Melbourne says, has anybody tried using the AJA Kona cards in an external enclosure? Was it reliable? And he specifically mentioned a Thunderbolt 3 case for an eGPU.
I've used the previous versions in a Sonnet enclosure, and it worked perfectly. So I had no problem, and that was older tech. Jason?
I've used an older generation in an OWC Titan eGPU case, and I found it to be rock solid, but I haven't used the most recent generation.
Yep. Go ahead, Stuart.
Were those on Macs or PCs?
Mac.
Because I'm looking at using a PC. By the way, and I'm just going to go back to the last question, and I know I'm being rude doing it. 3-camera rig for a feature film.
Also an excellent lightning rod.
I agree totally with Chris Fenwick. Punching in, I can always see the distortion off center on the lens.
I think you can also pick up VHF TV stations on there.
Next question.
No, you hate Jeff.
Mike Henderson of Colorado says, is there a way to show a recurring Zoom meeting like office hours in the meeting tab in the Zoom app?
Go ahead, Jason.
Sure, just add it. Don't add it in the app. Add it in the browser on your account, and then it will show up.
I've got a long list. Mine, the list that whenever you guys get the thing that I've extended it out another 30 days, I now have a list of 30 of them that I'm slowly working through. So you definitely see a list if you build it in the web browser as opposed to the app. Next question.
Ken Jones of Seattle says, I had my first ATEM Mini crash yesterday. USB output went black. HDMI out was still good. All the lights looked normal. Power cycle fixed it. Who sells those little mounting feet to raise the box a bit for ventilation, or any other ideas about what it might have been the cause?
Go ahead, Jason.
Get some Legos. We haven't figured that one out yet.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I designed the little mounting feet, and I put them on Thingiverse. So if you just go on Thingiverse and you have a 3D printer, I don't sell them. I made the design available for free. Anybody can download it and print it out. Find somebody with a 3D printer, or check your neighborhood for a 3D printing club of some sort, and send them my design. They'll print them out in TPU and stick them on the bottom of your ATEM Mini. Mine has my feet on it, and it hasn't overheated yet. So I leave it on 24/7. So I think it does help with air circulation somewhat. Just search for, on Thingiverse, just search for ATEM Mini, and you'll find several different solutions for getting it up off the ground.
That's great. I'm gonna try that. I didn't know that you put it up there, so I'm gonna go get it today. Get printing. Paul.
Yeah, you don't even need a stand. In the meantime,
for
just
all
put any object.
We can barely hear you, Paul. So whichever of the many mics that you're using, you're not.
All right.
We're not hearing any of
All right. Just put any object under the ATEM Mini. That'll take care of it. Just whatever's handy. Just get something to elevate it up off the ground.
I recommend whittling. Just get some pieces of wood and just whittle away until you get it just right.
Anything handy.
Little
How about a
magic
toaster
marker,
oven, Paul?
Magic marker and a buck knife. You're good to go.
Perfect.
Kev?
That's perfect.
Yeah, if you want to get some of these things pre-made, Amazon components, computer components, you can buy feet for all sorts of electronic, different heights, different widths, and you just buy the bits as you want them, a few quid each.
George?
This one look pretty, but I have them in my road case. Amazon sells door stops. Just stick 2 door stops on each edge and you're good to go.
That's good. That's great.
There you go.
That's good.
All right.
All right.
Damp
Next
sound.
question. Next question.
James Bowd here in San Diego says, Alex, in deciding between the MixPre 3 and the MixPre 6, which features matter most?
One of them is sound. I mean, sound, obviously, but I mean, surround or stereo. So you need the 6 if you want to do, you know, so there's a
ambisonic.
Ambisonic, yeah. Sorry, thanks for getting that. You knew what word I was going for. So you know, so ambisonic, you need to use the 6. I don't think you start really getting real outputs out of it until you get to the 10. Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, pretty much. Almost everyone that I've like had one-on-one sessions with setting things up, wished those that went with the MixPre 3 wish they went with the 6. So just go with the 6. You're gonna want it in a couple of weeks.
Or just go with the 10. Just call it a day. You know, like or just move to the 8 series. You know, like we as a what we use for it, because we buy a lot of the MixPre 3s. I think we've bought probably 30 of them in the last month and a half or 2 months. For what we use them for, the 3 is fine because we're just using a single mic. In fact, if it was a MixPre 1, it would be fine. Maybe MixPre 2. It doesn't I don't need the channels because I'm using it just to clean up audio and get I like to double end records. So that means that I don't want just an interface to the computer. I want the ability to record. So what we do is we tell people to hit the record button, then they have their conversation, then they upload the file. In fact, when we send the MixPres out to folks, we actually put their name on the file. So we set up the naming in the MixPre so that when they hit record, when they upload it to Dropbox, it already has their name in it. So they don't have to do anything other than pull that little card out. We send them a little card reader, send everything out to make it easy for them to move it back to us. And that dramatically changes the quality of the audio. So the MixPre 3 is invaluable for high-end conversations. But if I was going to get one as a general purpose recorder, I would absolutely get a 6 or a 10. You know, like I wouldn't get it for and for a simple camera like interview, it would work well. I would definitely get the MixPre 3 2 because you have 32-bit float in it. And why that's important for you is that it gives you an incredible amount of range to make mistakes. So if you're on a set and you're a little low or a little high, you have a lot more to work with there. Courtney and then Mickey.
I love my MixPre 3 and it's great. But if you don't have the budget for a MixPre 6 and don't need the super pristine mic preamps that the MixPres have in them, the Zoom F6 has most of the features except for noise assist. It does have auto mix. It does have ambisonic. It does have auto level control. That's auto mix. Yeah, and it's small, compact, and has better power management. The power management on the MixPres I've found is a problem because it just doesn't run very long on internal batteries. The Zoom F6 will run a long time, and you have 3 sources of power, which it switches seamlessly between, and seems to last much longer. And it works well, in a remote. So it records, of course. It has time code, of course, which the other MixPres have. So it has almost all the features except for the noise assist. And the MixPres aren't quite up to the caliber of the sound devices, but I think they're good enough, definitely for Zoom meetings and things like that, and most normal Muggles interviews.
I have to admit, I'm obsessed with preamps. So that usually, that's why I pretty much don't do anything without a sound devices device. I don't put any audio into anything other than X32s maybe, and QL 1s and 5s, but generally if I'm on the field or I'm doing anything, it's all mixed sound devices of some kind because of the preamps are just stunning.
The F6 also does do 32-bit float recording.
Yep.
And it'll also do both 32-bit and linear 16-bit at the same time in separate files. So that's another cool thing that it does.
That's great. Mickey?
Yeah, the MixPre 3 in terms of an interface is only 6x2, 6 in, 2 out, while the MixPre 6 is an 8x4. So if you for some reason need to get more than 2 channels out of your computer into the MixPre, which some of the people on the panel have had to do with their setups, then that's another reason to go with the 6.
We'll always tell you to buy as much as you can afford, and no more. If you can't afford it, don't buy it. You'll be happy with what you have. But if you can afford it, you can get it.
That's not true.
You just grow into it. Anyway, next question.
Adam Taylor in Providence, I presume Rhode Island, says, has anyone used a DMX-controlled pan tilt system for DSLR cameras? And they're looking for recommendations, I presume.
Oh, DMX control for...
I want to see one. Like,
Yeah.
can I see one? That's awesome.
Yeah, we're very interested in that idea. Yeah, we'll do some research on that. Jason will give us a full report soon.
Oh,
He's gonna
yeah,
go
I'll get
find it.
right on that.
Yep. No, I've never heard of that, using a DMX to control pan tilt zoom. So we'll research that.
Well, on Verilights, don't they have pan tilt, focus that's part of the DMX protocol for controlling, remote head
Yeah,
light.
it's not very precise, but yes, definitely.
Protocol for a camera, and plus there's a lot of video playback protocol in DMX. They run through video walls, synchronization with lighting cues, things like that. So I wouldn't be surprised if it has pan tilt protocol built in.
Interesting. Yeah, I've never. I guess it's just completely outside of my my experience set. So anyway, next question.
Alex, I believe it's Lignowitz. I may be mispronouncing it, so sorry. In Toronto, any good utility to record a Zoom ISO for every panelist locally?
The way most people do it is that you have a computer for each person, or a computer for each. You can have, if you have a couple monitors, you can get out a couple, but it's generally a computer for each person that's your screen scraping. I mean, that's I think that there's no other way to do it if you're trying to get each person as an ISO. Everybody that I know that does this, and there's a lot of people doing it. I do it a slightly different way because we create a point-to-point connection with each computer. That way we have separate audio pipes. But most people, actually everybody else other than me that I've seen, doesn't do it that way because it's really hard and complicated and expensive. The easiest way to do it is you just have a bunch of computers join as participants and grab onto the, each one of them pins a different person and screen scrapes. Having a computer try to screen scrape two of them would be challenging on the computer, of doing it well. So you really need a computer for each one. You could do Courtney's HDMI recorder, which isn't very expensive. So you could output it to that. And that has a pass through, Courtney?
Yes, it does have a pass through. And what I've been promoting is these stick PCs, because these are these with the Atom processors. 3537 is a quad core processor. It has HDMI out. And this is a cell quantum access.
Have you joined a Zoom from that?
Yeah, I have, and it does work. Of course, the more people that are in the Zoom room, the harder it has to work, and the hotter.
But if it's only pinned, it may not be as.
Yeah, if it's only pinned point to point, you're not going to have a problem because it's only having to render one window.
Or even if it has a bunch of people, if you go to pin it, it'll only have to deal with one at a time.
Exactly. Yeah. And this runs a full version of Windows 10 licensed, and so you have your whole operating system. And these are about $130 on Amazon.
So theoretically, for $250, $300 a piece, you could have like little recorders.
The more expensive, they make a more expensive. This one only has Wi-Fi, but it has pretty good Wi-Fi because it has a separate antenna. And most other stick PCs don't do this, and that makes all the difference in the world. You have to.
But you could have a stick PC with Ethernet, right?
Yeah, they do make a version of this. It's about $50 to $60 more that has its own gigabit Ethernet port on the back of it. So it's a little bit bigger.
I'm super interested in that. Who makes the HDMI recorder?
I'll post it again. It's Chinese. It's it's labeled under several
I'm
different.
Curious about that. That's a really interesting way to record a whole bunch of people in a Zoom. Is to have like 10 of those.
Yeah, it does do pretty. It'll do 720p or 1080p, I think. And it's just switching. And the interface, as you press a button, it starts recording onto a USB stick. You do have to have it formatted in TFS, which might be a problem for some Mac people, but or FAT32. But FAT32, it'll divide the files every 2 gigabytes.
No one wants that.
Yeah, in TFS, it'll just record a huge file of MPEG 4. And it does about 10 megabits, I think, is its default.
The other thing you have to remember as you start doing these records is just remember that you need to allocate about 10 megs per person for that. So if you want to do 10 records, you should have 100 megs down. Now, you don't...
Yeah, bandwidth, yeah.
The bandwidth, at least 7 or 8 megs per person. It's twice what it's using. So our experience is Zoom's using 3.25 megabits per second. That's what it's pegged at per person if it can. And so you want at least twice that, which is 7.5 or 6.5. But then
are your point-to-points all 1080p or are they 720, Alex?
1080p. Yeah. But it whether it's 720 or 1080p, we found that it's 3.25 megabits per second. So you're getting at 720, you're getting more bits per pixel. And it does. The 720 is more stable than the 1080. The 1080. The problem with our 1080 and trying to do real-time 1080 is that you definitely see more glitches than you would see, little dropouts than you will see if you were at 720. Jason and then Fenwick.
Yeah, the other thing to mention is that you'd best be prepared with a real enterprise-grade switch and router. If you're going to try to line those up with Ethernet, get a real switch.
Yeah, Fenwick.
How do you... I'm sorry, this is an ignorant Mac person asking this question, Courtney. How do you control that thing? Do you have to do some sort of screen share into it, or does it actually have
a little keyboard?
Oh, that's adorable.
What?
This I buy these. I've got 40 or 50 of these that has a touchpad here, and you can get them either Bluetooth. They'll go Bluetooth wirelessly, or you can plug a dongle. These have a.
So then, how do I see what that is? Oh, it's on the USB.
It passes through the recorder. The recorder is HDMI.
Yeah.
It's an HDMI monitor.
And you put a monitor in line with it, and there you see it. The recorder passes through, and this is the source. So you can put a monitor in the chain anywhere downstream.
And the point is just the ultimate low budget, low cost way of having a PC to record a feed.
Well, and to be able to record, if you want to record 10 different people, it starts to add up. I mean, it starts to be real.
Whoa. Am I hearing Alex being worried about spending money? What's going on here? Who are you, and what have you done with my friend?
All right, Guy, did you have something to add?
Yeah, just because I know Jeff Keith lives in the attendees, I know he's going to say cloud. So even the lowest end AWS instance can log into a Zoom meeting and you can record, and then you have no bandwidth concerns because it's up there, wherever.
And it's not very expensive.
No, not at all. It's just knowledge and then duplicating those instances. But then you don't have to worry about power redundancy. You don't have to worry about internet redundancy. It's just sitting up there. So something to think about, but it does take some propeller head expertise.
Yep.
So hire Jeff.
No, that makes sense. Yeah. Next question.
C. Nichols of Austin, Texas says, does it make any sense to set up Atmos in a non-rectangular room, for example, half cathedral? And he is talking home theater.
Yeah, it's where the speakers are. Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, definitely. You can do it in a oddly shaped room. Maybe it won't be nearly as effective if you go with a sound bar, but with discrete speakers, you can get away with it. With your high channels, you might want to spread them out a bit more just to get a bit more of a sense of separation between them if those speakers are a lot higher than they're usually at. But most, pretty much all modern AVRs come with a measurement microphone that will tune your room, not only in terms of frequency response, but also in terms of delays and timing.
Jason?
Yeah, I mean, if you don't have a ceiling, then upward firing speakers are going to be mostly terrible. So I see no reason why you can't use downward firing speakers from on high.
Right. Like my office that I'm going to be putting a lot more speakers into has a really high ceiling, that kind of goes up to the top of the house. And so it's 20 feet high or something. So I'm going to be laying the speakers out much lower than that. And, hanging them above, and then I'm probably going to put something above it. My wife is horrified by what I'm doing to the office, but it's fun. It'll be functional. Anyway, next question.
Derek Hirsch of Oakland says, I'd like to use Dolby Atmos for podcasts and journalistic pieces. Is there a standalone Atmos renderer outside of the Pro Tools or Nuendo ecosystems? And he has a note also, is there any other hosting platforms beside Tidal and Amazon HD?
And it's Atmos, not Atomos. Atomos is the recorder. Atmos is the surround sound.
Sorry.
That's very confusing. Jason, you were going to add something there?
No, please go ahead.
Oh, Logic. Logic will do it. Do you have to buy the separate plugin, Mickey, for Logic?
Yeah, either way, you need to have the Dolby Atmos render, which comes with the production suite, the Atmos production suite. With the advantage of Pro Tools and Nuendo is that they natively understand Atmos panning and generate the metadata, and that is linked up with the Atmos render. With other DAWs, like say Ableton, Logic, as of now at least, is that there is a Dolby provided, they call it I think Music Panner or some Atmos Panner, something like that. And that is how the audio and the metadata gets into the Atmos render. So either way, you need the Atmos render. It's just a matter of the solution that you use based on the platform. And I think with this, specifically with this question, right now the big question mark is the platform that this will be distributed in. Right now for podcasts, there's no distribution platform that supports Atmos, but I'm sure that will be coming soon. And yeah, you can author .adm renders out of the production suite. You don't need the RMU for that. So hopefully these the upcoming platforms can support just the standard ADM render from the production suite.
And the reason that we're going to spend time on it is that the platforms are not mature yet, but they're coming. And now that Apple is biting down with the surround in the ear and the vision, on the screen, this stuff is coming, and we always say, when did Noah build the ark? Before the rain. So what we want to do is you want to think about, if we want to take advantage of this market as a group, we should be learning this now, not when it suddenly rolls out and everybody's doing it. That's when there's a rush. So getting some expertise in this in our spare time, and building up capacity is worth doing. Again, in the areas that I'm focused on a lot is obviously interactive conferencing, education, AR, and then Vision and Atmos are things that I think are going to be big markets over the next 2 or 3 years for the handful of people that know how it works and know how to take advantage of it and provide that to other people. And I do agree with Mickey that I can't imagine Apple going very long. I don't have any information, but I can't imagine Apple going very long without supporting surround in podcasting. It seems like it would be an easy thing to do. Jason and then Kev.
Yeah, it's worth mentioning that the production, so really you should just be playing right now. And the production pieces, the production plugins for any DAW are going to be, well, first, if you've ever mixed in surround sound, much easier than anything you've ever seen before. But also, I believe you can play in these for free. But even if not, they're very inexpensive. I remember being surprised at how cheap the Atmos engineering plugins were.
Got it. Yep, Kev.
Just following on what you said about new markets and new companies, I read an article this morning that Netflix is looking at going into podcasts. They're actively looking into it now. So that's another place where Atmos will definitely be used.
Yep, absolutely. Next question.
Mike Henderson in Colorado says, any resources for getting started matching Blackmagic design cameras with the ATEM? Not much on YouTube, and I'm assuming he's doing camera matching or color matching in the cameras.
We keep on bringing that up, and I was really busy over the last one. Not next week, but the week after, I'll work on trying to get a little camera matching tutorial together where we can talk about what that looks like. So my schedule is a little bit more flexible now. So I will, we'll work on doing that. There's not really any good resources out there. All right, next question.
Trevor White, a walker, of Rosamond, California, says, I'm on a fence between the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 4K or 6K and a Sony A7S III. I would use it for streaming, board meetings, and other events, but we also record site tours and B-roll in 4K. I'm generally the only person shooting on a DJI gimbal, so I'd also have to pull my own focus on the Blackmagic camera.
Jason and then Stuart.
It's really going to come down to which glass you have, I think. But dollar for dollar, I've never seen a better camera than the 6K straight away.
Yep, Stuart.
Yeah, Jason got most of that 100% correct. And I would also go for the 6K. But the only question, or the only thing I would add is what size gimbal, because the moment you start adding out to the BMD, it is a bigger body. So you're going to need a bigger gimbal for it than you would with the A7. That's the only advantage the A7's got, physical size.
Go ahead, Bruce.
Yeah, so I've got the 4K Blackmagic, and the reason I went with that is because it conserves power. So unless you've got batteries to bring in and keep changing out your batteries, the 6K is more power suctioning. So and also if you're shooting 6K, the 6K is great, but if you're shooting 4K, you don't need the 6K, in my opinion.
I would only buy the 6K. I don't like the lens. I don't like my lens choices in micro four thirds. I just don't think they're as good as Super 30 or as good as the Canon mounts. So I find that I'm very limited. I feel very limited in the micro four thirds ecosystem compared to the and then secondly, I do think that even if you're shooting 4K, being able to even if you're only using 4K, being able to shoot with a little extra resolution just means that you have a little bit of pan and scan that you can use there, or a little bit of oversampling, which can kind of handle some of the grain. So you take a 6K, scale it down to 4K, and what you end up doing is smoothing out the image, because the as the algorithm smushes the pixels together, it usually gets rid of some of the grain. So anyway, I think that the 6K, I mean, for the price difference, for me, I would absolutely get the 6K every day. I think a lot of people are getting 4Ks, but I do believe that the light sensitivity is better on the 6K than the 4K as well. Jason?
It's worth mentioning also, so this is the RS2 gimbal. If you've got a 6K, you are going to need to counterweight it. This isn't much. This is 100 grams, and that does it nicely. But yeah, the 6K, full disclosure, will absolutely suck down power. That said, it's worth it. It earns it.
No, and I use external power for it all the time. I only use the internal power when I don't use a little battery below it.
Oh, those camera batteries are worthless. Like I can suck through a camera battery, like a Canon battery, in like 15 minutes.
I will say that you have to use the Canon branded batteries, or they suck up really fast. The cheaper batteries don't survive.
Oh yeah, those are like 5 minutes.
Yep. Next question.
James Babbitt from here in San Diego says, Alex, in the Interatron process, are people looking at each other and almost making eye contact with the lens?
That's the idea. Yeah. So you pass the video from both sides to each other. And we've done it with 6-8 people at a time. And we've also done them with, full size people. So that the teleprompter is big enough that the person looks like they're full size in front of you. So there's a lot of different ways that you can do it, but you're absolutely piping on both ends. You're piping them so that they can see each other. The original Interatron process was really the two people talking to each other, in the same room. So they didn't even use an extra mic system. What we added to it years ago, a decade ago, was Skype. So we started just piping Skype in so the producer could just ask the questions from home and look straight into the camera. One of the things that we noticed is with the Interatron process, more than just the eye contact, is that our faces look different when we're looking at a person. Like, it responds to that person. And so having that eye contact and the way that the eyes converge, as well as the facial expressions, changes in Interatron compared to them just looking at a camera, or even and then looking off screen, which I hate. Mickey, and then Bill.
Yeah, just a question on top of this, like Alex, when you guys do this, do you have to like punch in so that the prompter view on the other end is a full headshot? Like say if the main camera view is like on the T's, do you have to punch in so that it's a headshot, or no? You find
we haven't normally, but usually they're pretty much head and shoulder when we're doing it. If it's the only person we might shoot, it's this frame if it's the producer on the other end. But otherwise, we do decide on, we use smaller teleprompters when we're doing text. So we never go over 15 inches for a text-based teleprompter. For Interatron teleprompters, we go anywhere from 24 to 80 inch. teleprompters. So that's the range for the one, because that makes that person a lot bigger. Go ahead, Courtney, and then Bill.
Yeah, if you want to pan tilt that camera on an 80-inch, it kind of makes it problematic.
Yeah, you can't do that.
Tilting within the glass.
That's why you need an 8K or 12K camera, is that you can do all of it later in post.
Yeah, and we always use 4:3 format teleprompters, because that'll give you a bigger head for Interatron, rather than having to deal with a 16:9, because that's wasted space outside there. And I did a job once where it was a commercial, and the woman was a documentary director and insisted that the talent couldn't read the script more than once the same way. So she insisted that we shoot with 2 cameras and that they have the same eye contact, and she insisted on beam splitters. So we ended up having to rent a 3D rig, had 2 Alexa cameras mounted at 90 degrees with beam splitter for the 2 cameras to give you coincident. And this was for a web-based ad, and they were shooting with reds in 8K. And then I had to mount a teleprompter beam splitter on the front of that, and it was the size of a Volkswagen, and she could have just used a regular teleprompter and an 8K camera and punched in to a close-up to get a close-up shot.
I can't think of the name.
Angle of view. So
to get back to your pan and tilt thing, I can't think of the name of it right now. AJA makes a processor that lets you pan and scan inside of 4K, and combined with the teleprompter, it's kind of amazing, because we can get really close-up views, and you can save all your positions in the.
Is it a smooth? Ramp in, ramp out stuff? So
it just pans right over.
On air stuff.
Yeah, we did it. Interestingly enough, we did it for a corporate internal meeting where there are 3 people that are doing presentations, but they all wanted to sit on a couch. So we had a wide, and then we just smooth into this person, pull back, smooth into that person, pull back, smooth into that person. And it worked really well, and they all could just look at the same, because that was the big thing, is figuring out how can they all look at the same one. Now we rented the box because it was like $25,000 for the processor, but it worked really well. Go ahead, Bill.
When we started doing this back in the old days, when you went out and shoot with people, the one thing we forgot at the beginning and then never did after that was to bring lighting for the person on the other side of this thing, right? Because we always lit the talent, but we never lit the interviewer. And you'd throw some light under it and they look like Frankenstein, and that makes for a not natural conversation. So light both sides.
Yep. Most of the time we have both people are ending up in the show, so we end up lighting them. Go ahead, Kai.
You kind of see my setup here. I've got you.
You got something going on with your audio chain there.
Nice audio effect.
Yeah, that was.
Sorry about that. When I cut it, went to audio follows video, but basically you could see the teleprompter there, and I've got you in the middle. And a lot of times I'll be resizing this window to make the head bigger, so I've got the eyes right in line with the camera lens, because I can see a little bit of light leak, and so I can tell where my camera lens is.
That's great.
And then if you guys want to see that view, let me see if I can cut. So it looks more like that with that. And then I hope you don't mind me showing the teleprompter view. So I can see this is what panelists see. And so I've got you lined up dead center.
Yep, that's great.
Works out nice.
Next question.
Bruce Himmelblau in Lake Bluff says, I'm live streaming using StreamYard. They only accept MP4 video or stills. Is it possible to generate an alpha in MP4 or animate PNGs for motion lower thirds?
Yeah, go ahead, Jason.
Absolutely. You can do it in Photoshop. Is there like some sort of insanely easy automatable way? No, not that I know of.
Well, but to animate the ping, I mean, you can do
PNGA is a standard.
But you can do ping sequences. I don't know if StreamYard will do ping sequences though. I don't know if it'll do a sequence.
Oh, I don't know about what StreamYard can do. I'm just talking about can you animate a PNG?
For this specific question around StreamYard, I don't know if there's any way to. I don't think MP4s will hold a stream. Now, what you can do is, again, the old-fashioned way to do that is to do it over pure black and then never let any of your blacks go below 15%. People will not see it in the compression, but you can key it on the way through. So your background is pure black and you just have your graphics. It's best if you just don't use any blacks in the graphics, but if you have to, don't let them go below 15%. And then you can, I don't know if StreamYard can do a Luma key. No, I can't do that. It's too bad. I was thinking about a switcher. Most switchers can do a Luma key, but I don't know how to. I don't. Yeah, StreamYard might be limited in that sense. Chris,
I gotta say, I watched a StreamYard show with Preto the other day. I was really amazed at the stuff it could do. I can't remember who it was. Who was it, John? Some guy. Anyway,
it was Ross
so
from
there's
Streaming
actually
Universe.
Yeah, there's actually two questions there. One, MP4s can't hold an alpha. And I think that the way the question was worded was, can you take a PNG inside StreamYard and like slide it in or something? And you'd
is that
have
the
to...
question, Bruce? Bruce is right here.
That's
so.
what it sounds.
Yeah.
Oh.
And so I'm trying to create an animated lower third as opposed to just a static lower third.
Yeah, I think you'd have to dig into StreamYard. I mean, it seems pretty cool, but it also seems like a very cool solution that's very kind of hard coded to this is what I can do. But I know literally nothing about it. I'd only seen it once
Jason.
the other day.
Well, as Alex said, you could absolutely, if you had a set strip and you could animate a Luma key, you could absolutely have it peek in.
But I don't think when I thought through that, that's for a regular switcher. I don't know how you'd do that otherwise.
I can generate the image from After Effects, export it out with an alpha, but can I create an alpha with a MP4?
No, you can't. It doesn't. That container doesn't hold a second channel. Yep. Next question. So yeah, there's not neither of those work. I think with StreamYard you're stuck with still until they add something more to it, which I imagine they will. Next question.
Tim Turner in Eagle, Wisconsin wants to know what everybody thinks of NVIDIA's Maxine.
I don't have any opinion. Anybody got an opinion? No.
Never been nice to me.
No. Yeah. So outside of our area of expertise at least today, ask again, and we might have somebody in here that can talk to it.
Is that the one that the Wilburys wrote a song about?
Yeah, exactly. Next question.
Mark Harder in Brooklyn says, no one is mentioning the Zoom F8. Have you all passed on that one?
Go ahead, Stuart.
I have a friend who has it, and it is pretty awesome for the dollars. It works really well in passing line level back to the camera and time code into the device from the camera and with tentacle syncs. Yes, recommended device.
There you go. Just a lot of us for a variety of reasons use a lot of sound devices here, but the F8 is great for the price. Absolutely.
Is the F8 the one that does 32-bit float now?
Yep.
Yeah. It also looks like an octopus.
Yes, it looks like an alien.
Oh, that's the one. For some reason, I thought it was a different one.
The F8 is the one that's a standard bag form factor. One. I think it's the H8 that looks like
H8 is the new one that looks like an octopus.
I have to admit, I completely wrote it off as soon as I saw it. I was just like, nope. so that's form factor. I'm sure they spent a lot of time working on that design, and I don't think they hit the mark on that one. Anyway, next question.
Alex, does that form factor fail at your don't be weird?
No, it just fails, and I don't understand how I would it's just that there's so much management of cables that suddenly they're splayed out everywhere. Like that does not. I'm not excited about that. Like I want them, having XLRs pointing out in different directions would be a management nightmare in my opinion. Like they just need to all go straight out one way or the other. So it's not a don't be weird. It's a that would, maybe if you're going to use it as a podcast and put it in the middle of a room and have the cables go out, but I don't see what I get out of that. And I would have just made it straight. I think that would really make me crazy. Anyway, so next question.
Craig Gibson in Washington, D.C. says, speaking of getting a real switch, I'm in the market. Recommendations on a 10 gigabit managed switch that won't break the bank.
John Preto, and then Jason.
So I'm getting ready to upgrade my network to 10G and Wi-Fi 6E, right? So whatever you do, don't buy a Wi-Fi 6 router, wait for E to come out. I've been talking to Chris's neighbor from the north, Stan Chan, about this. He's already done this. The Ubiquiti Dream Machine is a router, and it's got 8 ports. They have a 4-porter and an 8-porter. It looks really good, and it's really inexpensive. It's like $380, something like that. And then the question is, do you want to use fiber, or do you want to use Cat 6 or Cat 7 or fiber? So that's really the question.
All right, go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, +1 on the Ubiquiti. As far as I'm concerned, you can pretty much get away with waiting on the router. The Dream machines are fantastic. I use a powered, relatively cheap, I don't know what relatively cheap means anymore, but like a relatively cheap Ubiquiti switch. And the nicest part about it is you get a tiny little view screen like the size of a postage stamp, and all the stuff you need to know about a switch is right there in the view screen, and it makes all the difference.
That's great. Next question.
Ed Willick in Valley Cottage, New York again. Where does Alec and the panelists shop for their IT infrastructure devices, such as routers, switches, UPS, fiber, and so forth, for your network video over IP and audio over IP needs?
Most of my network stuff, I have to admit, I get on Amazon. Like I just ordered on Amazon. I don't have I mean, you have to find out what I need, but I don't. The Meraki stuff, obviously, we ordered directly from some reseller. I mean, I don't know which reseller we're using right now, but you have to go through a reseller for Meraki. But the other stuff that we get is I just get ordered on Amazon. Mickey and then Jason.
Yeah, I get most of my stuff from local suppliers here, but if I can't find it here locally or if it's not in stock, Amazon.
Yeah, Jason and then Stephen, and then we'll move on.
You know, I've been impressed at how quickly Ubiquiti's actual store is shipping directly to people. In every case during COVID that I've had to do one of these installations, a client ended up canceling the Amazon order because it was faster directly from Ubiquiti. Almost said DVE there. Faster from Ubiquiti. 2 days for free, anything over $50.
Yeah, I think that for me, the thing with all stores, the challenge that they all have is that it's another password. It's another thing I have to manage. It's another, like, that's the biggest thing and I'm sure that's an issue. And Guy, do you carry the IT stuff? Do you carry switches? And
No, but as I'm getting asked more and more, and as I'm starting to learn NDI and get deep into it, I'm starting to realize that I've got to go that path and become that propeller head, which I haven't been kicking and screaming, but I know that there's a right side of the brain that's creative and the other side that's an analytical, and I'm being forced into this analytical world, kicking and screaming, but I'm learning it. I just bought that Ubiquiti Dream machine that John was talking about, and so I'm waiting to install it because my IT guy said, you're going to want a separate internet connection or your family's going to hate you, because he's like, once you start blowing this stuff up, you're going to knock everybody out and they're not going to be able to do their schoolwork and stuff. So it's like, I'm waiting on a second internet drop so I can install the Ubiquiti Dream machine. And I've already got that 10 gig switch from Ubiquiti. That's the 8-port with power over Ethernet. That's running this Bird Dog into this vMix station right now. And it seems to be stable and working well.
That's great.
But it's those two things that you got to switch. It's in the PTZ Optics manual. It says MDNS and IGMP snooping are two things that you got to enable for it to be stable, and then it works well.
That's great. Stephen?
I'll say CDW for getting higher end stuff with warranty, and somehow I've actually ordered and it showed up the next day here in Berkeley. So however they do that, I like the magic.
Yeah. Next question.
Michael Vosby, Woodstock again, says, I have an older but not quite good stereo in my media center. I noticed, though, that when watching movies, it doesn't work well for dialogue. Would I get better results using a soundbar for video and just have the stereo for music? Any recommendations?
Sometimes that's an odd thing with the center speaker. Like there's something off with the mix. So most dialogue is sent to your center speaker if you have any kind of surround or anything multi-speaker. And if something's wrong with that mix, I found that you suddenly can't hear anybody talk. Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, exactly that. Like for traditional narratives, traditional mixes for narratives, dialogue is coming out of the center speaker. Now, if you are sending, like, say, Dolby Digital, Dolby Digital Plus, all the surround formats to your receiver, and if the receiver is not set, since you are currently only monitoring in stereo, if the receiver is not set to just decode out to stereo, then it will think it has a center channel, and that could be the reason why you're not hearing the dialogue as well. So make sure that your receiver is set to only decode out to stereo, fold it down to stereo. In terms of, like, will the soundbar work better? Like, depending on what format the soundbar is, if it's a 5.1, 7.1, or Atmos soundbar, yeah, that's going to sound so much better than just, like, the stereo speakers that are even though they are discrete, it's still going to sound better than those.
Jason?
Soundbars will almost certainly work better for exactly one reason. They are, no offense, entirely idiot proof. Like, you plug it in, it plugs through, and you get exactly a center channel in the center. And everything else, bass response, no, of course not. But yeah, for dialogue, kind of hard to mess up.
Next question.
James Babbitt said, Mickey, what did you mean when a photo on the when you mentioned a photo on the TV versus a headshot?
I don't know what that was. I think we lost the thread there. Photo on the
Sorry. I'm just looking at the question. Teas typically mean like on when you're framing for say an interview or even for a narrative film. The teas are like from the eyes, the T there, your nose and the eyes, and also your chest. There's a T there, so those are the T's. Roscoe could probably explain it a lot better than I could.
Go ahead, Roscoe.
Let me see if is my audio okay right now? Or is
little low.
It is still low. Okay. Anyways, draw a tic-tac-toe board on the screen, and the T's are the outside. Each actor sits on one of the tic-tac-toes with their outside eye. The sleepy seed of the outside eye sits on this tic-tac-toe. On the other actor, the sleepy seed of their outside eye, and each actor has their portion of the screen so that we in our mind know where they're going to show up. It's tied into that 180-degree vector, the principal axis line. There's about 100 names for that. Stay on one side of the screen.
And that's two different versions of T's. So Mickey's talking about like a straight frame, and this one, and you're talking about line of direction, which is both valuable T's. So we've learned about both T's today. Next question.
The next one is actually just a comment. Keenan Campbell said, I second the Dream Machine. We use it every day for my entire network. And then I guess our last question of the day is Jim Barnes of Kansas City, who says, any recommendations for comms for remote locations?
Right panel. Hoo-hoo.
Call Tucker or hit up Tucker in Discord, and he's got a great service that we use. It works flawlessly. We use it around the world, and it works flawlessly.
Yeah. So
you should say the name of it, John.
Oh, Unity. Sorry.
Unity. Yeah. So Unity is something you can build up. And then, you can do a phone line, obviously. But then Unity is going to be where you're going to start adding more channels. And then you start getting to the only three I really think are really phone, Unity, Clearcom. I don't think that like RTS or Readle really produce anything that's valuable in that area, unless you're really putting all their hardware down and building it all out. And I haven't seen any other ones that are really that competitive. So those are the three, and they scale up in cost accordingly. Go ahead, Chris.
I was going to say concerning Unity, when John and I worked on a show a couple of weeks ago, and I literally just had my earbuds in my ear. Actually, I took it out of the case before I put it in my ear, and my phone in my pocket, and I had constant communication with John and Felipe, who was switching the show from his apartment in Prague, and it was super comforting. I always knew those guys were there. And it's really interesting when you're talking about remote production. One of the things that happened was I said to the executive producer at one point, I was kind of standing next to him at a lull, and I said, isn't it amazing how we could do all this stuff over all this distance? And he goes, what are you talking about? I said, well, like Felipe, he's in his home in Prague. And he's like, what? And I said, yeah, he's at his home in Prague. He goes, I wish you hadn't told me that. And I said, well, why? And he goes, there's a lot of internet between here and Prague. But the bottom line is he was available and present the entire time. Yep. And so, in production, sometimes you want to just like pick up something and throw it at a guy across the room. It's like, what? I'm paying attention. But even if that guy is thousands of miles away, if he's always there and always listening and always responsive, nobody cares.
Yep. Courtney?
Well, I've never used Unity, and so I have a question for both John and Fenwick. Is it push to talk or Vox? So does each person that is listening have a separate channel that they control? Do you have to have access to your phone to do that, or do you touch something in your earpiece?
It's either. You can do Vox. John, let me ask you a question, John. I never asked you this. I was on Vox to you, I believe, all day long. Was it annoying?
No, it wasn't. And you can do both, just like he said. And then you've got 6 listening channels and 6 talk channels, right? And then push to talk, and then you can turn Vox on or off just by hitting the button.
It's pretty cool. Courtney, you should set up. Let's set up a demo and play with it. It's fun. It's
Do they
pretty
have an
amazing.
Android version? I
Yep.
assume.
Yep.
Android.
Yep.
Interesting.
Mickey?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on PTT versus Vox. Like, if you're in a relatively quiet environment, the Vox what do you call this, detection should be fairly reliable and clean enough that it wouldn't annoy people. But if you say, like in my case, usually on live stuff, I have loudspeakers open playing the program, I stick to PTT for that.
Yep. Okay, go ahead, Jason.
I would add that you really should never, if you're not familiar with how to set Vox correctly, don't use it for the first time in production. Like, get it right first.
Last question.
Yeah. Keenan Campbell of Princeton, Illinois came in late with, what are you using for the equipment and the pathways for IFB?
Well, we use all kinds of things for IFB, so it just depends on whether they're hardlined. I mean, there's wireless IFB, of course. There are tools that will, it's just a matter of, to us, it's just a mix minus going back to that person that goes into their ear, that we incorporate extra channels of comms and other things into it, or just the comms. But it comes out of either a lot of announcers have, you can have wireless, like what Jason's showing there. Announcers also may have a announcer box that is kind of their headset or comms, along with some talkback features where their mics can go back only to production. And so the Studio Technologies makes those. Mickey's also showing the Sony returns. So Sony makes returns. There's the ones that I've used the most are the Shure. I think they're I want to say the PD1000s.
PSM 1000.
PSM 1000s, right? That we've used a lot. Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, what I mainly use on productions on sets are the Sennheiser 500 series IEMs. They're pretty solid for the price. I think each receiver runs 400 US. It's just pretty darn, a good deal. I oftentimes have to use Comtex as well. The very popular, although much lower fidelity. And also the Electro IFB systems are also nice, though they are, I find the Sennheisers to sound a lot better than those, and also they're a lot trickier to program.
Have you ever bought the extension for the Comtrex?
The mini mite antennas, those huge antennas.
Yeah, like in B&H.
I don't have them, but I've had to use them. Pain.
So I pictured it when I saw the picture of it. I thought it was about this big. I thought it was like this. Like, so Comtex has these. Comtrex has these. Is it Comtex? Has these
COMTEC.
Yeah, TEC. Comtex has these. They're made for. They were actually created for the Mormon Church to do all the language, things in different channels and everything else. Anyway, so they turned into a big business. But there's an antenna, an extender that you can get on B&H, and when you see the picture, you think of I completely pictured an antenna that was that thing that was this long. But it's like 6 feet long. Like it's this giant antenna.
You're picturing shark fin, and you end up with solar sail.
Yeah. It was a funny thing. Anyway, thank you all for coming. Thank you to the attendees for giving us a lot of great questions, a lot of juicy morsels to talk to. Every day we just go, well, we'll see what happens. Eventually they're going to run out of questions, but no one ever does. There's always more questions to ask, and they're always good. So thank you all to all the panelists for a great discussion. And we made it through another couple hours of chatting about this, and I think we all learned a fair bit. Again, it's crazy. We will do this again. Remember the early doors open at 6, and then the show properly starts, as proper as you can be, at 7 o'clock. And we'll see you all tomorrow. Bye, guys. Thank you.